So my name is Andrew Lynch from the Discobots. We're going to be going a little bit over the kit of part from AndyMark, and I'm going to present my whole screen here. So this kit of parts is available on the AndyMark website. They have different code names for it. AM14U5, which varies over the years. They've released a version of this many years in a row now that hasn't changed significantly, but there are changes, and it's important to make sure we're using the most or the latest version, because we do have a lot of older versions over the years that our FRC team has collected. So when you look kind of at this basic page, which is straight off their website, they go through the different kits that you can get, the different components that are needed. So CIM motors are one of the key components. Bumper hardware to mount bumpers, that's a requirement of FIRST Robotics. And then vertical battery mount is how you're going to mount the batteries. And these are separate items from the standard kit instructions. And then a lot of these kits, they'll give you a nice layout of everything that's in the kit, quantities, what sizes, and then eventually CAD files, which is STEP files. We call them STEP for short. And then the drawings that will go through it. And what I did is I opened up this user guide in another tab. So we're going to switch over to that. So this is kind of the starting guide that everybody's going to have to read carefully as we build this. It shouldn't really take very long. I mean, if you're really cooking and going through every step quickly, it's probably an hour or two to knock this one out. But since a lot of you have never done this before, most people will take a bit longer. So the first thing to note is the gearbox in the kit is what they call the Toughbox mini gearbox. And this is a pretty standard kit. There's only like 3 gears in them and a shaft, a hex shaft, and this mounts directly to the frame. Oh, we got another person coming in. So let's see here. Once you use this default gearbox, there's a few other optional gearboxes that we could also use that have things like shifting, so 2-speed, other smaller gearboxes, but a lot of these we don't have. You have to order separately, but the standard kit is going to always come with the Toughbox Mini, so that's a pretty important setup. Ratios are important because this is going to tell you how fast things are going to go. The included ratio with the following gears, this collection of gears in green, is going to get the robot going close to 10 feet per second, with assuming I believe a 6-inch wheel. Yeah, right here it says 6-inch wheel. So these are all kind of important things. If you went to a 4-inch wheel, then you're obviously going to go slower, and you might need a different setup. And we do have a variety of gears that we could possibly do different configurations, but it's probably best to just do the standard kit ratio for now. Let's see here. Any other big items? So these kit rails have a lot of different holes, and it can get real confusing when you start looking at what holes go where. Where do I put the drive shaft? And they're built for a lot of different configurations. And they'll show you a few different types. An 8-wheel drive configuration is pretty unusual for a kitbot, but it can handle it. And then the standard wheels that they include are these 6-inch high grip wheels. But there are also other types of wheels. We're probably not going to have a lot of these other types of wheels, but we do have other 6-inch wheels. It's going to be a little more complicated to see if we can get those to all fit in them. And then from there we have what they call the Hex Hub. So this forms a hexagonal shape in the shaft that engages into the wheel, and that's how it engages and turns the wheel. and you basically press fit these into the wheels, and once you put them in there, they're a little difficult to get out, so you have to make sure you do it correctly the first time because it'll be hard to change. Then most of the drive kit of parts is going to use what they call belts. And so that's what this Gates is, a brand name of a belt, and it'll show you the different sizes. And we have to be a little careful because we do have a variety of belts that are not necessarily the kit of part belts, but we should have a lot more of just the standard kit of part belts just laying around ready to use. And so those are the common components that you see from the kit of parts. The rest are going to be smaller things that are going to be inside the gearboxes, and screws, drive rails, and let's see here. This is an important step that we're going to have to kind of really decide on. We talked a little bit about this on Saturday, but there's 3 different configurations, what they call a long, square, and a wide configuration. We're probably not going to use a wide configuration in this game. There's a little bit of debate between a square and a long configuration. And once we make the cuts to these, it's hard to go backwards. So I think a lot of what we're going to do in the next few days is going to be trying not to cut unless we absolutely are certain we're going to cut a certain configuration. And we can just keep building and building and eventually get to the cut area. Again, I'm going through this fairly quickly in a record session that we can share with other students, and then we'll have some questions at the end for people who want to talk more about the details. So try to think about your questions and save them to the end if you have them. So here it's going to go through the process of how you put the wheels together, and I'm certain we have a number of wheels that are already built. The trick with a lot of stuff that's already built is making sure that it was built correctly. And so looking at this diagram, looking at whatever wheel that was built and not assuming that it was just done the right way. So that's an important part of this is to look at these types of wheels and to see how they were done. And at this point, we should have 6 wheels, I think is mostly what we're focused on. I don't know if we're totally set on 8, but I think 6 for sure. That should be done correctly. And then the same with the gearboxes. Gearboxes, if they're not done well, you can hear them pretty quickly when you spin them. They won't sound right. Or if they don't have the proper grease, that's going to be a little harder to see sometimes. But you could see some grease kind of oozing out of these gearboxes. Sometimes you can have too much grease. So a lot of different ways the gearboxes can be done. So we just have to be cautious as we pull out some of these older components that are older gearboxes that were already done. Getting the chassis square is a little bit of a trick. And this is kind of how it's talking about how you assemble the bolts. And you can make it into more of a parallelogram if you're not careful. And the robot's not going to be quite a well-driving machine. So these are things to keep in mind as we're putting together the frame of the drivetrain. Here it's kind of showing the cross bracing that goes between. We use these things called Churro Tubes, and I think it actually uses the word churro, but they kind of look like the food churro that you might eat. And they're pretty much just a giant spacer that you can put a screw on the end, and it'll be a way to brace the frame in this aspect. We can also use other things besides the Churro Tubes if we want to do additional bracing. And then from there, we assemble the gearboxes onto the rails. You put one wheel through the hex shaft on the gearbox, and then put things like the bearings and the shaft collars, and in this format they have a CAD of the belts, but obviously the belts are going to be they're going to have to be tensioned and pulled out just right so they fit, but that's kind of the idea of how you would pull them out and eventually slide in the other wheels. Getting all the different locations can be a trick, but if we follow this guide and we think about it as we're going through it, it shouldn't be too complicated to do. From there, we'll have all the different other wheels that we will put in until we get to the full 6-wheel configuration with belts. And so the drivetrain will go through the gearboxes on the center, go to the center wheel, and the belts will go out to each wheel on the outer side. So all the wheels will be connected together through belts. We will not have any open wheels. So it shouldn't take too long to do this setup, and we might break out here for questions and comments. And I'm not sure how much of the recording side I will keep of this, but we'll just do